Come on,
Mm.
quit coughing, Kent.
Me moo. Unique New York. The Chiefs have a battle for cornerback 2 coming into training camp. Who's going to win that? Plus, Chiefs play Buffalo Bills week 11 in Buffalo. Let's talk about it.
This is KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
Welcome into a live edition of the KC Laboratory presented by Emprise Bank, member FDIC, our partners in Possible here at KC Sports Network. Wonderful to be working with them. They've been a day one supporter of KC Sports Network, and we are appreciative of them. I'm appreciative of this beautiful man sitting with me here today, Matthew Lane. Matthew.
Oh, I thought Craig was back for a second. I mean, he's doing good, but I thought he was back with that kind of introduction.
Maddie, I saw a video of Craig Stout swinging a golf club today.
Okay, you guys threatened to put me back on the golf DMs, and then yet I didn't get to see a video of Craig swinging a golf club. So
I'll have him send it to this group now.
I'm honestly disappointed. I think he probably did it on purpose. But I want to say like he didn't want me to like ridicule him. But
here's my favorite part of all this. So Craig sends this video of him swinging a golf club, but it's him swinging from the left side because like how his camera situated, it was filming in reverse or whatever. And Tucker goes, are you a lefty? And I just look at his hat. Look at his backwards spelling on his hat, Tuck. You would know that that's not the case. But no, his swing looks great.
Tuck, when he's not even here to defend himself, I don't like that.
He needs to.
You're moving kind of shady over there.
Step it up a little bit. Apologies for the voice. I've had some allergies going on lately or something like that. I don't know exactly what it is, but I'm struggle busting a little bit today. It got under 80 degrees today here in KC, and for some reason I decided to put a hoodie on because I was chilly enough to put one on today. I don't know what's going on, but that's the vibe that I got going on today. But anyways, happy early 4th of July to everybody. We appreciate you listening to the show. Hope you have a wonderful holiday, hanging out, celebrating hopefully with somebody, people you care about. So we hope you all do that. We are very grateful for you, and thank you for hanging out with us the night before the 4th of July. We appreciate you. Okay, let's get into this battle for the cornerback 2 position. So obviously, the Chiefs didn't make any moves whatsoever really when it comes, outside of a late draft pick to address the cornerback position. They hit on 2 day 3 guys in 2022. On top of also getting a blue chip prospect in a trade up in that same draft. They've had 3 players that are now third-year players heading into this season at the cornerback spot. You've got Jaylen Watson, you've got Joshua Williams, kind of both, seemingly leading the pack for being cornerback 2 for this team. Matthew, what's your overall, what's your overall look of the cornerback room outside of Trent McDuffie and some of those guys that could potentially step in there?
Okay, so it's such a tricky conversation because I think when you're talking about cornerback 3 last year, why is cornerback 2 a battle for cornerback 2 way different than cornerback 3? Actually, I think is where you probably got to start it. And when you're talking about cornerback 3, you're talking, a player that is still on the field for the vast majority of the reps, right? Like the Chiefs were in nickel or dime or had extra defensive backs on the field like 70+% of the time last year. It was very often that they had a third corner out there. But when that guy's rotating, that's different than when it's a number 2 corner. A number 2 corner is playing 99% of the snaps. You are going to have somebody across from Trent McDuffie on almost every single snap, barring a very, very, very few probably in goal line situations. So you're no longer able to just rotate 2 different guys, 3 different guys, whatever it may be, freely because they are only coming in some packages. It's kind of nice when it's a sub-package cornerback and they maybe have a different skill set. Maybe on one drive, I'm throwing out Jaylen Watson, who's a little bit more technically sound, maybe a little bit more physical, maybe a little bit more technically sound, but maybe doesn't have the same like high-end ball skills or something. But then the next series, I can throw out Joshua Williams, it gets a little difficult, I think, for offenses to plan how to attack those guys. Now, there's a lot of crossover in their game, so I don't think this was completely breaking opposing offensive coordinators' mind, but as a rotational third corner, I can see the value to maybe those guys rotating in and out. But now we're talking about a starter. Like, now you need somebody to go out there and eat up these reps so that they can become consistent and always be on the field. So like, I wanted to get started with this is like, why cornerback 2 having a solidified player is more important than like your nickel corner or whatever you want to call it, being allowed to be a rotational player like it has been the past couple seasons.
No, that's exactly right. And that's a great point because, your cornerback too, when you look at like a snap count distribution perspective, you're going to see them get a significant bump and a significant spike. And you saw Joshua Williams and Jaylen Watson's essentially kind of split that cornerback 3 role, last year. And so those are 2 guys that were kind of coming on the field, playing on the outside and allowing a Trent McDuffie or L'Jarius Sneed to move around a little bit more, kick inside. But, when you are talking about one of these, and we largely consider Josh Williams and Jaylen Watson. There's some other candidates we might get into in a minute. But, one of these guys is going to have to, see, 70, 80, 90% of the snaps now. Like that's what your expected workload is for your cornerback 2 when you're talking about getting one of these guys on the field. So it's a little bit different. Like to Maddie's point is like, okay, so when it's a sub package guy, you have a little, not necessarily room for error, but you're relying on somebody to be a 90% snap player. And it's going to have to play with a lot more consistency across the board for a longer duration of time during the game. And that's where things I kind of factor in when you talk about this.
Yeah, for sure. And like, I think that's the first place to start. Like they have to come up with a solution this year. This can't be an answer by committee. So then now we got to kind of run down the options. I think we start at the top. Jaylen Watson is a guy that I think has been a little ahead of Joshua Williams the past 2 seasons for the Chiefs. Like they would play him a little bit more frequently when both were healthy. He seemed to be the guy, especially in crunch time, that they tried to get on the field a little bit more often than Joshua Williams. And of those 2, that made sense. He was a little bit further along in his development. He had elevated to a Power 5 program at Washington State before coming into the NFL, whereas Joshua Williams was coming straight from Fayetteville State. So higher level of competition, further along in the developmental profile. He seemed to be just get it a little bit quicker, which is to be expected. But what I think you saw last year was there wasn't a significant step from Watson. He didn't really capitalize on what I thought was a pretty strong rookie year. He was still kind of the same guy, generally technically sound, very, very physical, made a couple plays on the ball when he had his eyes to it, but you could see some athletic limitations popped up and his technique didn't get so good. His anticipation didn't get so good that he kind of really ran away with that job. But like, he is the guy that over the first 2 years seems like he should have a leg up on this competition, right, Kent?
No, I agree. And I think you would think from just some of the, usage, but also situations they've been put into, you would think that, right? I kind of, I point back to, and this is just like an overarching thought that's not necessarily some of the stuff on the field that we saw, but like, I just remember like last training camp, there seemed to be a little bit of concern about Joshua Williams and Jaylen Watson both taking that next step, and a little bit of concern that they were ready to take another step. And I think that's why you kind of saw some them kind of splitting some snaps in between each other, is because there was a little bit of question marks around whether or not they were going to be able to do it. And that's kind of, I think, why you saw more of a timeshare and them getting involved a little bit more, in a timeshare type situation. So I don't know. I think this is a big year for both of them. T. Smith asking a question: Watson playing was Watson playing hurt a bit last year? Yeah, I believe he did have some injuries that he's played through over the course of his career and even into college. I think he's had a shoulder issue that he's kind of played through that can lead to some inconsistencies there. But I do also wonder if if Jaylen Watson just isn't or just is what he is at this point. Like you talk about the developmental arts, and honestly, here's the thing: what he is a quality rotational player and in tremendous value as a 7th round pick, a slam dunk home run 7th round pick type player. But you might also start to see a little bit of maybe where that gets capped off a little bit. And that's kind of the question that you kind of have about Watson.
Yeah. And like, I think that's where we got to last year, right? Like, I think as a rookie, he really stood out because of how ready he was able to jump out on the field and not be in any way, shape, or form a liability, and then even make some plays. The problem is, like, he's also not a guy that you can throw out there to not give help to and hold his own against the highest level competition, which is completely fine. That's, not everybody is going to be Trent McDuffie, L'Jarius Sneed. Not everyone's going to be that caliber. So I think he just didn't take a huge step forward in year 2, and that could be related to injuries, or it could be, he's kind of at what he's going to be in the NFL, which is a very useful rotational corner 3, corner 4 type of player. So then you move to the next guy on the list, which is Joshua Williams. A much better athlete, maybe much as a stretch, but a better athlete. His combination of size, speed, change of direction ability, and physicality, and then some flashes of ball skills, you can clearly see how this guy has another step to take. You can see how Joshua Williams goes from being this good rotational corner to a good starting level cornerback. The thing is, though, we just haven't seen those steps really taken yet. When he's been forced into extended playing time, we have seen teams actively go at him, and sometimes it leads to success. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes he has excellent plays that should flash that ability. So it's just his play seems a little bit more inconsistent, a little bit more reliant on that athleticism, which gives him the upside. But I also think leads to a little bit more unreliability. And I think that's probably why he has struggled to take the job from Watson at this point. You're muted. You pulled a me. Let's go. Yeah, finally.
It took 5 years. No, that's not true. I think every time I get sick, this happens. Because I don't really mute things very often, but if I have like a cough or something, I stay muted and all that
at least you didn't turn your camera off to cough into a live mic this time.
That's never happened. The audio people would have no clue of that whatsoever. But yeah, Joshua Williams, it is like there's just a lot more high variance in him, right? And I think the traits are. I would say I do think the traits are better than Jaylen Watson's across the board. It's just a matter of if he's been able to put it together consistently. If he's been able to process the game as consistently as they'd liked him to. There's been some plays where he does seem a little bit lost from time to time, and it's just finding and developing that consistency. So and I think Jaylen Watson even he wasn't perfect either. Like last year, he struggled a little bit with that too in that regard. And I think that's where some of the concerns and some of the question marks with Steve Spagnuolo was kind of coming around.
And I just want to say real quick too, the Chiefs last year unloaded a lot more on the secondary than they did with those guys as rookies too. Like as rookies, Craig and I, when he was still here, talked a lot about a lot. Still here on the podcast. He's still here with us on Earth. I just want, he was, we talked about a lot. They played a lot of static zone 2 years ago when those guys were all, when McDuffie, Williams, Watson were all rookies, a lot of static zones to protect these young corners. Last year, they threw a lot of man, they threw a lot of shifts, they threw a lot of match coverage, they threw a lot out there. So it makes sense that young guys are still struggling to pick up on some of it. And that goes for a Williams and a Watson. They did ask them to do a lot more last year mentally.
Yeah. And I think that it's only going to be more now too. I think it's only going to be another increase in them taking a step. Like I think the expectation is because of the amount of continuity that they have in that secondary. It's not that they're going to be going back to square one just to accommodate the cornerback 2 situation. They're going to be continuing to throw things at these guys, at this secondary, at this defense, because they do have a lot of continuity and they need to. They need to be taking advantage of that. Their best way to mitigate maybe some of the question marks you have with some of that secondaries, in the cornerback room, is if you can throw a lot of stuff at defenses, if you can continue to let Steve Spagnuolo be in his bag at a really high clip. And that was part of the reason that this team had so much success last year, on top of, a L'Jarius Sneed being here, was the amount of continuity they had coming back on that defense and allowing them to. So I do think these guys, year 3 is a very defining moment for them. And I think if you are, if you're thinking about the cornerback 2 battle, you're just thinking about this in general, we're looking at a group of players that the Chiefs haven't tried to make big improvements on. They brought in Kamal Hayden, but that's it. They really haven't gone out there and addressed the cornerback position in any big way. They've got 3 young, controlled players for the next 2 seasons with Trent McDuffie, Williams, and Watson, and Nazeeh Johnson, which I'm sure we'll get to in a second. But they seem relatively content with where they're at the cornerback position too. And maybe it's because there's some familiarity, some continuity, some trust that's been developed, and trying to give them the runway to figure this thing out themselves. They maybe feel like they have enough swings at the position where they're going to find the right, 3-4 cornerbacks to really contribute. And if they do, great. That kind of, things kind of settle themselves out a little bit. But we talked about Williams. We talked about Watson. Nazeeh Johnson was getting run with the first team before he suffered an ACL injury at the beginning of training camp. This is a player that has the kind of athletic traits. He was a tier 1 cornerback athletic tester when you put him into the cornerback metrics that Craig Stout created. I know he was listed as a safety when he was drafted, and I know there were some people that considered him a safety, and he played safety his last year at Marshall. However, him playing as a cornerback, when you plug him into some of the cornerback athletic testing, he has the kind of profile that is highly predictive of contributing. And you've even heard Justin Reed's comments in recent memory about how Nazeeh Johnson might be in line to start last year. So kind of the forgotten man after his first year. But boy, it really seems like he was starting to make an impression, and you kind of wonder if he's going to get an opportunity here.
I definitely want to talk about Nazeeh Johnson. But Derek, I would love to turn this entire podcast into an Alex Pereira conversation. It would be so much fun to talk about his traveling towards top 5 all-time UFC fighters, mixed martial arts fighters. But I think Kent would go to sleep and shut me down. So
hey,
shout out.
I watched it.
I know you did.
I'm coming around.
I have slowly, made Kent watch a couple big fights lately. It's been a lot of fun.
Yes.
It's been a lot of fun. Now, Nazeeh Johnson, I think there was a good chance he was about to start last year. I think he was about to really be in the middle of this rotation as that corner, not at start, I guess, be the corner 3 last year. I think there was a real chance he was going to beat out Watson and Williams. It seemed like there was a lack of excitement for Watson and Williams to start last year's training camp. I think Steve Spagnuolo kind of even said it. And then all of a sudden, right after that, Nazeeh Johnson was starting like, oh, hey, this guy's getting first team reps. Then he quickly gets hurt after that, and you kind of have to reroute. And I think everybody kind of forgot about all that. And Nazeeh has come out since then and been like, hey, I got some, I was going to be, they had big plans for me. So I think he really had a chance to start. I think that continues this year as long as he comes back healthy. It seems like they really like what they saw of him, and the opportunity was there. Nobody was winning this job last year. It seemed like Nazeeh Johnson might have been coming on strong at the right time. I will say the one thing that gives me a slight bit of hesitation here, and it's just a little bit, you're going from L'Jarius Sneed and then Watson or Williams on the outside. That's like 2 guys that are starting out there with 31 plus inch arms. That's 2 guys that are going to have length at all times. Nazeeh Johnson down at under 30.5 inch arms, right? Yeah. They're a little bit shorter. You put him and McDuffie out there at the same time as your 2 outside corners in base. You're having some of the lowest, shortest armed corners, starting cornerback duo in the NFL. Hasn't stopped the Chiefs, right? They clearly like Trent McDuffie. They clearly put him out there, and they live with the lack of his length being able to defend the ball. So I'm sure they would with Nazeeh Johnson too, as long as the rest of the play is really good. But this is also a defensive scheme that loves the length at the cornerback position. So, we kind of have to see how that goes. I think he's very much in this competition, especially if McDuffie plays outside more frequently. Like, that's a whole entire curveball too. If McDuffie is, as he said, playing outside more often or full time, that really opens up an entire other part of this conversation to be, is Nazeeh Johnson worth putting in the slot and letting another bigger guy play on the outside? How are they all going to work that out? It's there's a lot of ways the Chiefs can go here.
Kamal Hadden also has sub 31 inch arms, by the way. And if I look, I'm trying to find at least Nick Jones at least has some longer vines, so we're good there. But yeah, that's a great point too, is how that roster and how that room kind of shakes out, where if Trent McDuffie moves inside or doesn't move inside and he stays outside, now Nick Jones has entered the conversation a little bit differently than he has. I want to just kind of run through, we can just kind of, we've named probably the big 3, and I think the big 3 that are going to be kind of in competition. But Nick Jones, got some run a little bit last year. The Chiefs always also given themselves some interesting outside corner type position profiles with Kelvin Joseph and Keith Taylor. Miles Battle, another cornerback 1 athletic tester. They've given themselves a few different looks and some different guys in that cornerback room. And we talk about Nazeeh Johnson and his potential factoring into into last year's conversation. Maybe they felt like they saw enough last year to say, hey, look, between these 3 guys, between, Josh Williams, Jaylen Watson, Nazeeh Johnson, maybe we, or not maybe, we feel comfortable, finding who we need there. But anyway, sorry, I know it's a sidebar, but any of those kind of outside guys you kind of like, Echo Boydo, I know I'll probably upset some people if I don't bring him up as well.
Kelvin Joseph, I guess, gets a little bit of interest because here's a former, 3 years ago, he comes into the NFL draft. I think he was a top 100 pick by the Dallas Cowboys, might even top 50 pick.
He was a second
Yeah,
round
man,
pick.
top 50 by the Dallas Cowboys. As a rookie, he showed some promise. His second year didn't go as well. I know he got in some like legal disputes, questions, whatever they were. And so, got released from the Cowboys, didn't play much for the Dolphins. He definitely wasn't as good as he was his rookie year. But here's a guy that was good enough to be a top 50 pick just a few seasons ago. You bring that kind of talent in for a cornerback room that clearly has an open position. Obviously, there's physical ability there. He has shown it at least on some degree on the NFL level. So he's a guy at least worth keeping an eye on. I don't think you can just write him off immediately as long as he can pick up the system, which is difficult to pick up, especially in your first year. And you're going up against a lot of guys that have been in this Steve Spagnuolo system for a while. So he's definitely already behind. But I just think if I were to pick out one of those guys, he kind of has the physical upside. He has the physical profile and ability, like the athleticism, to maybe make an impact on this team. So I got my eyes on him when training camp starts. I want to see where his reps really start to come in.
There's a lot of guys worth kind of keeping an eye on here. I mean, like they've thrown a lot of swings at the cornerback position. They got a lot of bodies, and there's intrigue there. It's just a very unproven group, and I'm going to scare some people, so don't take it like this, but it reminds me a little bit of the conversations that we were having about the wide receiver room last year, where it's like, hey, look, there's some intriguing swings, there's some intriguing lottery tickets here, some talent. Let's just see how it all shakes out. I think the baseline is a lot higher at the cornerback spot than what the wide receiver position was last year. There's more known commodities. There's more players that have had play a lot of snaps, but surrounding those players is, and I don't think a couple of those players, it's not unattainable to be surpassed on the depth chart. When I look at Haddon, Nick Jones, Echo Boydo, Kelvin Joseph, Keith Taylor, some of those players it's not an unattainable opportunity here for them to be cornerback 3, cornerback 2. I mean, they got enough players here that they can kind of piece some things together. And I think they got some interesting, worthy enough swings. I did see someone say it could be a sneaky, trade deadline type addition. And yeah, that's the case. If things don't shake out, then you know what? Maybe you do. Maybe you go and try to find somebody at the deadline. But hey, look, if you give them till the deadline to try to figure some things out. And I think you can.
I think the Chiefs feel confident enough in Steve Spagnuolo and then their safety room to make whoever's going to be playing cornerback okay. Not saying good. I think it'll clearly be a step back from last year when they had L'Jarius Sneed as well, and you have to have these other guys in there, right? So, I don't think it will be as good, but I think that they trust the defensive coordinator and their safety room to make these guys good enough that they don't have to panic and make a trade move. If someone's available, like Rasul Douglas went for nothing last year, if I'm not mistaken, at the trade deadline. Or no, maybe it was
third round pick.
So I don't think the Chiefs would go that high. I think if there's somebody available that they think can start for a late day 3 pick, they might make a move. But I think they would rather put out there a Najee Johnson. They would rather run out Watson and Williams or Nick Jones or somebody else just to see if it works, the protection of that safety. I did see this, oh, not that one. DeAndre Baker here was mentioned as somebody, I think that was in regards to Kelvin Joseph. Yeah, the Chiefs have tried to make these swings. You can throw Mike Hughes in there too. They've tried taking swings on ex-talented cornerbacks and it work out their first team. I will say, at least for Kelvin Joseph compared to DeAndre Baker, he's an athlete. He ran a sub 4.4. He's fast. He's explosive. DeAndre Baker's issue was he couldn't move at an NFL level. So I do think there's a little bit of a difference there that they do. He at least has the athleticism to play the position in the NFL.
And a trump card with his size too. Kelvin Joseph had some really strong measurables just from a length, height, weight, speed perspective too. So
I'm not correct. I don't have the CBAT stuff, but glancing, I would say he's probably a tier 2, right? He's probably ended up in a tier 2. Bad vertical jump and a 3-cone probably pushed him down. But he probably ended up as a tier 2 CBAT. So that's, solid.
All right, we're going to take a break and we're going to talk about the Buffalo Bills right after this.
We appreciate you supporting KC Sports Network by listening to our podcast. You have helped us become the highest ranked Chiefs podcast network in 2022 and 2023. And don't forget about our daily Substack newsletter, the best written analysis you can find on the Chiefs straight to your inbox every day. kcsn.substack.com.
We are well into the November slate in our season preview. We're kind of, I think, anticipating kind of finishing up pretty close to, training camp starting, which is weird how that works. It's almost like we planned ahead, but we are talking about the Week 11 game at Buffalo. It's a Sunday afternoon football game on CBS. you knew that the CBS was going to try to keep that one because they've hosted a lot of classics between the Bills and the Chiefs. But Matthew, what do you think the quality of the Buffalo Bills roster is?
I was muted and my mouse wasn't on the button to change it, so I had to take a second before talking. It's good, but not as good as it's been the past few years. I mean, like, they clearly had to lose some guys. Now, they were older guys that maybe weren't performing quite as well as they had hoped, right? So it's not like they were losing guys in the middle of their prime, but they lost important pieces to this roster with Stephon Diggs. They lose both Poyer and Hyde as their safeties. Like, they lost a lot going out. And so they need to have a lot of young guys step up that maybe haven't taken those full steps yet, right? They did a good job developing their offensive line to be either good enough or even a little bit of a strength, or even to be good in some situations. They've kind of rebuilt their team to lean on the run game a little bit more now that they have a few new offensive coordinators. So I think they are making smart moves when they need to make them, but I think that also coincides with the overall talent of the roster probably took a half step back, at least for this season, until we start to see the direct development of the guys they've been drafting the last few years really come to fruition. Because they lost guys that mattered, and they still have some young players, but they lost guys that mattered. They still have a lot of unproven people that need to come in and take those spots.
I would like to congratulate the Kansas City Chiefs for waiting out the first wave of the Buffalo Bills attempt to win a Super Bowl. So the Bills went all in when, they spent a lot of money on Von Miller, and a couple years ago, like last year, they were trying to really go all in to try to push their chips to the middle of the table to try to go and win a Super Bowl. And the Chiefs were able to fight and fend that off. And now Josh Allen's going to get more expensive. And now the Bills are kind of having to make the decisions that the Chiefs had to make, when the Tyreek Hill kind of situation arose, and how they decided to, hey, look, we're going to quote unquote take our lumps. We're going to change the roster complexion a little bit. We're going to go young. We're going to go with draft picks. Yeah, but the Chiefs won the Super Bowl when they did that. That's what's so great about this, is like the Chiefs have kind of already gone through the process that the Bills are going through, that the Cincinnati Bengals are going to have to go through very quickly here. So this year was paying for a little bit of aggressiveness that they had, I think, from the Bills' perspective, is paying for some of that aggressiveness and going for it, because they really didn't have a ton of room to be able to go out and spend a lot of money in the free agency. They didn't have, a ton of, big additions that they were able to make. And, they kind of went to a draft perspective. They trade away Stephon Diggs, and, they kind of put themselves in a position to, they're not really spent. I don't think they spent more than $8 million on a player, APY on a player this offseason. So they made some adjustments, and they're taking their lumps. But I think we've also, just because they're doing that, I think we might have underrated the roster a little bit. I still think it is a pretty good roster and a pretty capable roster. A lot of the big names of that first core are gone. The Micah Hydes of the world, the Jordan Poyers of the world, but Mitch Morse. But they still got plenty of talent on this roster. Still like what they have, and I still think they're one of the contenders in the AFC.
I think the big thing is the roster's still good because they have Josh Allen, and no matter what, he's going to make you good. And I think the swings have gone too far. Do they maybe lose one less game than now because of the guys they lost? Yeah, it's possible they maybe lose one less game. But if you look at everything else, they still have enough talent around the guy that's probably the clear-cut second best quarterback in the NFL. There's still plenty there to work with. They aren't going to all of a sudden have the bottom fall out of this team. Just even the talent, just even speaking from talent, not even the coaching or anything yet. No, I do think there's some spots in this team. There's a chance the wide receiver room changeup doesn't work out at all. That certainly is a possibility. Losing Gabriel Davis, you have to, include him too. That matters. And then you look on the other side, that secondary is going through a lot of changes too. So there's a chance their wide receiver room and their secondary could just be actively bad this next year. Or guys like Khalil Shakir, Curtis Samuel, Keon Coleman step up right away. And then on the flip side, they come in, Cole Bishop comes in and hits the ground running. Taylor Rapp and Christian Benford get to stay healthy. They have avenues to be okay at the positions they lost the most talent, but they definitely could have big holes there. But at the end of the day, we say this all the time with the Chiefs. They have Patrick Mahomes. Everything's going to be fine. I know Josh Allen hasn't proven it to that same level, but Josh Allen's pretty darn good. He's a really good football player. He's going to make this okay, at least in the regular season. Now, maybe when you get to the playoffs, maybe it's more than just the Chiefs that have their number where things get tighter, but it's still going to be a really good team going out through the whole year.
All right, what do you think the quality of the coaching staff is?
I am less sold on the coaching staff than I am the roster right now. I think Sean McDermott took more ownership of the defense last year, and I think losing Matt Milano and Von Miller being a shell of himself makes it difficult to give a full judge. But I don't think the defense was particularly good last year. I don't think it took any steps forward with him taking more of a leadership role in that regard. And we'll talk about Joe Brady in a second. It's just defensively, I don't think that they had one of the best defenses a couple years ago. The scheme was good, but it was a lot of talent. And then I don't know if they've ever maximized it since then. It seems like they've been kind of trying to hold on to the same formula that once worked. And every time they run into the Chiefs, it seems like they really struggle. Every time they run into the Froggles, it seems like they really struggle. So I don't know if they're that innovative on the defensive side of the ball. And I think that has to go back to now because he's taking the ownership. That's on Sean McDermott.
Yeah, I'm less enchanted by this coaching staff than I've been in a while, and I'm sometimes I wonder what the impact of Brian Daboll and losing a Brian Daboll had on that coaching staff, and maybe if Brian Daboll deserves a little bit of credit there too. I know it wasn't great with the Giants this year, but he was a coach of the year the year prior. I'm less enchanted with the Sean McDermott than I have ever been. I think this is a make or break year for him. Honestly, I think this could be a year where if things don't really go the way that they hope, maybe they look to try to get a different voice in there. Joe Brady, I don't think he got a fair shake in Carolina. I think it was a very rash decision when they moved on from him. I think he did some pretty good things for this team last year, kind of diversifying the run game for the Buffalo Bills, and then building off of that, I think he did a really pretty good job there. So I'm fascinated to see what this next season looks like with Joe Brady. It's a big year for both of those guys, both Sean McDermott and Joe Brady.
I think the thing with Joe Brady was that he came in and him and Josh Allen seemed to be on the same page. He seemed to do what Josh Allen wanted to do. Whereas I think before they were doing what Josh Allen wanted to do, right? They were always going to do what Josh Allen wants to do, but I also think they were trying to not force, but ask Josh Allen to evolve his game and to do more stuff. Cause that's what separates Patrick Mahomes from Josh Allen, is that Mahomes is always willing to find another way to do whatever it takes. Not that Allen hasn't trying. It's just, I think it's a little bit narrow of her scope. And that's the big difference between those two, is Mahomes will do any and everything and can do it. Allen's a little bit more specific in where he wins. Now, Joe Brady comes in, they're like, okay, we're not going to ask you to do everything on any given play. We're going to do the stuff that you like doing or that we're excelling in. I think that's very smart, obviously, when you're going over the grand scheme of things. So I think that's why it at least has started to work. I do wonder going forward if teams start to key in on that, though, and force the Bills to play in a way they don't want to, because I do think that they might get a little bit more unidimensional going forward. Not that they'll just run the ball or whatever. I just do wonder if their offense is going to become a little bit more simple right now with Brady at the helm than it had been in the past.
All right. How about you give me a new addition that you like, Matthew?
Oh, okay. I mean, as tempting as it is to say Marquez Valdes-Scantling, I think we are going to have to stay at the wide receiver position. We're going to do with Curtis Samuel.
It's good.
Because it's twofold. A lot of people wanted the Chiefs to sign Curtis Samuel, and I don't think I understood that signing for the Chiefs hardly at all. I think there's a lot of overlap with what the Chiefs already had on the roster or what they want, and because I think specifically in the Chiefs, or what he has done well over the years, has put up relatively empty stats. He's put up stats in a way that don't matter. Now, I think he would do that in Kansas City, but I think he's in a better spot in Buffalo to pull that off. And I don't not necessarily mean they don't matter. It's just where he wins is going to work better in Buffalo than where it would have for the Chiefs. So I'm just curious to see how that plays out, especially comparing him to Hollywood Brown throughout the next couple years, because those are the two guys that were kind of going back and forth for most Chiefs fans. So what does he do for this offense? Does he unlock anything for them that Khalil Shakir couldn't? Does he unlock anything for them? Does he win anywhere that Dalton Kincaid already couldn't do? Or is he just another guy to add to the mix that people have to worry about? I kind of wonder if it ends up being a little bit of an underwhelming signing for them, honestly.
I believe, doesn't Curtis Samuel have some level of experience with Joe Brady too?
Yes, that's where he had his best season with the Carolina Panthers, was under Joe Brady.
Yeah. So I think there's some continuity there. So Joe Brady knows how to use him, how to get the most out of him. And now you've got Josh Allen throwing you the football. I'll stay in the receiver room again, because there's really not a ton of additions to this team. Mike Edwards and Marquez Valdes-Scantling, a couple former Chiefs are on there, but this team really didn't go outside of the draft and make any big splashes in free agency. And so I'll go with Keon Coleman. The Chiefs obviously made the trade with the Buffalo Bills, trading up to acquire Xavier Worthy. Bills weren't really that interested in him, it seems, but it appears that they might have been willing to do business with the Chiefs more than they were willing to do business with the New England Patriots, because it sounds like the Patriots might have been interested in Xavier Worthy as well. So maybe that is part of the reason that they were willing to move back with the Chiefs. But Keon Coleman, I think Keon Coleman's in a really good situation for him and his skill set specifically, because Josh Allen should be willing to give him opportunities and throw the ball in tight and contested situations and allow him to go and make plays with the ball in the air. And some of his ability after the catch could really play in well there. So, I think Keon Coleman put himself and got put in a really good situation for his skill set. And I think there's a lot of question marks about that body type, that profile, and how successful it can be in the National Football League. And maybe the path to success is a little bit more narrow than other player and other, body types at the receiver position. But if he's going to buck those trends, I think in Buffalo is a great place for him to do that. All right, give me a player to watch, Matthew.
I mentioned him a couple times now. I think Dalton Kincaid, tight end they took in the first round in last year's draft. He had a good rookie year, and I think they're expecting him to take significant steps. And so we've mentioned Curtis Samuel, Keon Coleman. I've said Khalil Shakir's name a few times now. They have a lot of guys that are kind of winning in the same area, short to intermediate. And I mean, that's also where Dalton Kincaid's going to operate too. But I think of all those guys, he is the guy that you're going to look at to be the reliable one. He's the guy that you're kind of looking at to be, for a lack of better comparison, the Travis Kelce for Josh Allen, the third down target, the guy that's reliable to work out with him. They're going to go to him on third downs. He's going to be the guy finding all the space in the zone over the middle of the field. That's what they hope for him to become. So is he ready to take that step? Or is Kincaid just going to become a good NFL tight end? And if that's the case, that's great. That's still a very good pick for them. But I do think the way this offense is being shaped up with some of the other additions that we kind of already talked about, they do need that guy that can consistently get open. And I think Kincaid is the one guy of all these guys that's going to make the most sense for that. So they're expecting a big year out of Dalton Kincaid. If he can present those matchup problems that also allows Josh Allen's mobility and his huge arm to hit anybody that might be scrambling downfield, they can create a lot of space if he can be reliable for them. And I think that this second year is a big chance for that.
That was a really good one. I thought, Dalton Kincaid was coming on strong at the end of that last season too. So he was doing some really good things late in the year. And a lot of people talk about the deficiencies in the receiver room. Well, you got to remember they got a pretty good tight end there too, and a guy that can catch the football. That was actually going to be my player to watch as well. You've been 2 for 2 on picking players that I was like, I was hoping to. Matt Milano and Von Miller though. I think Matt Milano is one of the best linebackers in the National Football League, and his absence was definitely felt when he got hurt last season. As with, Von Miller had some struggles last year with injury and whatnot. If both of those players come back into form, the outlook of that defense changes drastically for this team. So if you get Matt Milano healthy, and if you've got Von Miller back and healthy, and on that last hurrah, if you can get something out of him. They need something out of both of those players to achieve what they want to, continue to, pursue and try to be in the upper echelon of the AFC and in the National Football League. So I'm looking at both of those players as really key players for this team in their bounce back and their attempt to, try to, unseat the Chiefs in the AFC. It's going to be because Von Miller has a lot more success and, Matt Milano stays healthy. So those two are players to watch for me for sure. How does this team beat the Chiefs?
Play them in the regular season.
You've used that joke like multiple times this year already.
Is it a joke?
Yeah, maybe not. I don't know.
I mean, how the Chiefs and the Bills fare in the regular season?
Typically, the Bills get them in the regular season.
I mean, look, this is late enough in the year. The Chiefs are going to tuck everything away. They're going to go out there and they're going to run their basic 1-2, 1-2, 1-2 all game long. They'll probably have a chance to win it late in the fourth quarter. The Bills will care a little bit more. Maybe Kadarius Toney doesn't line up off sides. Maybe he does. I don't know. But at the end of the day, the Bills are going to want to beat the Chiefs in the regular season more than the Chiefs are going to want to beat the Bills. And years past, the two teams have been close enough talent-wise, close enough quarterback-wise. Again, that's why Josh Allen's the second best quarterback in the NFL. It'll be close, and when it doesn't matter as much, like the regular season, like when the Chiefs want to hold stuff back against teams they expect to see in the playoffs, that gives the Bills a chance. And it happens that way every single year. It'll come down to the last drive one way or the other. And like I said, it just seems like every time that happens in the regular season, the Bills want it just a little bit more. I mean, I don't need to go too deep X's and O's about it. That's what it is. They're going to run the ball at the Chiefs. They're going to challenge the Chiefs linebackers to run sideline to sideline, rinse and repeat what they did last year in both matchups when they had success. And then defensively, Milano being healthy makes a difference. Maybe the pass rush plays well because it's kind of a complementary unit. They get some pressure on Patrick Mahomes when the Chiefs are trying not to do anything exotic up front or on the offensive end. Boom, you get a game that ends, 23-20 with the Bills winning by one score.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good start for the Bills. I think they've done a pretty good job starting decently historically against this team. So good starts, getting the Chiefs behind a little bit has been beneficial to them. Josh Allen has the chops to compete with Patrick Mahomes. He's fallen short significantly, but like the 13, several times, but like the 13-second game, like Josh Allen played awesome that game. Like people forget, I'm sure Bills fans don't forget, but Josh Allen is obviously not in the same tier as Patrick Mahomes, but he's in the tier below and he might be leading that tier. And he can go toe to toe with Patrick Mahomes and he can best Patrick Mahomes from time to time. Like it can happen. It is possible. It is in the range of outcomes for that to occur. So I still never going to bet on it, but I'm never going to be surprised if it happens, because that's the kind of talent that Josh Allen possesses. Who is the Chiefs non-Mahomes MVP in this game, Matthew?
Milano being back makes, them more formidable at the linebacker group, but like we've seen Travis Kelce torch Milano plenty of times. So, he's probably in for a big game, but I'm not going to go with him. I'm going to go to the other side of the ball. I'm going to go with Nick Bolton. I mentioned it just a second ago. The Bills, this is not about a specific player. I think Nick Bolton played very good for the Chiefs last year. He made some big plays in both games versus the Bills, especially the game in the playoffs. However, the Bills had success specifically isolating and attacking Nick Bolton. And it's not just him. Like there's obviously the defensive tackles not being able to keep blockers off of him. There's going to be the pass rush not getting home. But the Bills did a good job isolating Nick Bolton one-on-one with a running back having to race out to the sideline or in coverage where he had to defend, a lot of grass because of the way they spread it out. And I can almost guarantee they do it again because that's when they had success. You look the couple scoring drives to start the game in both matchups, going at Nick Bolton frequently with running backs, with tight ends, making him run side to side, coming out of halftime in both matchups. It was kind of the same thing. So I think it's going to be a big time game for Nick Bolton to kind of bounce back from what those were. He knows they're going to be coming at him. Go back to the tape, figure out where they're trying to attack you. And you lose a couple foot races, no big deal, but you do got to be on your A game. This has happened in the years past too. They've gone after Nick Bolton. A lot of times with the fullback. They'll use a fullback and go get one-on-one with Nick Bolton. And sometimes he wins, but more often than not against the Bills, they've had success running at him too, using a lead blocker because that's where he kind of has struggled the most. So I think the Bills offense versus Nick Bolton has always been a big matchup when these two teams go at each other. Bolton has a big game. The Chiefs defense could really click because I don't think you're too scared of the wide receiver room or the offensive line or anything else if they can't find a specific player to attack.
We can kind of go ahead and look at some of these bigger outside corners here for the Kansas City Chiefs. I know we just talked off the show, but like those, the bigger outside corners are going to play a factor in this game too, because they're going to have to match up on the outside with a Keon Coleman. The way that, if they run some Y-ISO, if they run some stuff outside, the Chiefs could have to have Dalton one of these corners could have to line up against Dalton Kincaid potentially too. So I'll go with the big cornerbacks, trying to deal with some of the bigger players in the receiving room for the Buffalo Bills, playing a big role there because, Josh Allen's willing to put on his big targets like a Dalton Kincaid and a Keon Coleman, and you got to be able to play through the hands. You got to be able to be competitive at the catch point, and those bigger outside corners are the guys that are going to be able to do that. So this is in Buffalo. What do you think the line is?
In Buffalo, you said?
In Buffalo.
Chiefs by 1.5. When the game starts, like right now, like if the line was available right now, I don't know, Buffalo by a half point, maybe a straight pick 'em. When the game starts, I think the Bills are going to struggle to start the year a little bit because of all the turnover. The Chiefs will be playing a little bit better at this time. It will be the Chiefs by 1.5 come game time.
I like it as a pick 'em. It'll be interesting. Like it feels like the Bills always have to, we talked about like the regular season. The Bills always feel like they have to exercise some demons. The Chiefs played the Bills in the playoffs in Buffalo and still ripped their hearts out. And so now this year is going to be like, oh, this is revenge now because it's our home. And so like it might be a rinse and repeat of everything we've been through. Like the Bills come into town, the Chiefs beat the Bills in the playoffs, then the Bills come into town the next year, and then they beat them in the regular season. And now we're repeating this cycle only in Buffalo this time around. I could see this being one of the few Chiefs losses this year. Like I think this team's going to win a lot of football games. I don't think, like I said earlier in the week, I don't think they'll let last year happen. The way, things kind of went down. So I think they're going to win a lot of regular season football games. This is one that's realistically a dropped game for them. I do think this is realistically a dropped football game for them. I think they have a chance to.
So you're picking the Bills?
I didn't say that. I think there's a chance. I would never do that, Matthew. Would you ever pick the Bills?
Oh, yeah, I'm picking to win this game. Lock it in now for when we do the game preview of the season. I'm picking unless things fall apart for the Bills before, then I'm picking the Bills to win this regular season game against Kansas City Chiefs.
Clip that, Grayson.
You're welcome, Grayson.
Yep. That's going to do it for this episode of the Casey Laboratory. Thank you all so much for listening. Happy 4th of July. We love you. We appreciate you. We'll catch you later.
Nobody circles the Chiefs like the Buffalo Bills.